Restart. Okay, good evening to all. Today's class will be on alcoholic and non-alcoholic liver diseases. The first about alcoholic liver disease. A few basic points about alcohol at first. Alcohol is the world's third largest risk factor for disease burden. Alcohol results in 3.5 billion deaths worldwide due to all causes, be it direct alcohol-related liver disease or seizures and its complications or traumatic injuries, etc. It causes 3.5 billion deaths worldwide. Alcoholic cirrhosis results in 60% mortality in 4 years, and it is responsible for 50% of the deaths from all causes of cirrhosis overall. One fascinating point about alcohol is that, though traditionally it is said that any heavy drinker for 10 years will develop alcoholic liver disease, but 80% of the heavy drinkers do not develop alcoholic liver disease. So what are the pathological stages of alcoholic liver disease? Something which I've been learning since second year. They are alcoholic steatosis, also called as alcoholic fatty liver disease, alcoholic steatohepatitis, alcoholic cirrhosis, and the fourth stage, which has been mentioned in Harrison, is hepatocellular carcinoma. Again, the same four pathological stages, what actually we see in the histology is in alcoholic steatosis, which occurs in 90% of the alcoholics, the accumulation of fat occurs in the perivenular hepatocytes, which is the zone 3, which later extends to the entire lobule. Why identifying alcoholic steatosis is important? Because it is completely reversible. The same alcoholic steatosis, when it progresses to the next stage of steatohepatitis, we have some irreversible changes like ballooning degeneration of the hepatocyte. Once it goes for degeneration, we have spotty necrosis. Any inflammation will cause polymorphonuclear infiltration. There will be giant mitochondria, and we have something called as Mallory-Ring body. Why identifying alcoholic steatohepatitis is important is it's potentially reversible. The next stage is any chronic inflammation will lead to fibrosis. The cell which is responsible for fibrosis in liver is the stellate cell. So the fibrosis leads to cirrhosis. Actually, it's a regeneration and cirrhosis. The thing is, regeneration or reversibility is possible even with cirrhosis, but the thing is uncertain. So alcoholic steatosis is completely reversible. Alcoholic steatohepatitis is potentially reversible. And cirrhosis, the reversibility is uncertain. And the last stage is hepatocellular carcinoma. So having read about what happens in alcoholic liver disease, now what are the mechanisms by which alcohol causes these liver diseases? One thing is direct hepatotoxicity by the alcohol itself. So alcohol is metabolized in the following pathway. Alcohol, that is ethanol, gets converted to acetaldehyde by an enzyme called as alcohol dehydrogenase. The acetaldehyde again gets converted by aldehyde dehydrogenase into acetate, which again further gets converted to water and carbon dioxide. So the alcohol dehydrogenase mechanism can occur by two mechanisms. One is what is given in the left side, MEOS, which is microsomal ethanol oxidizing system, which needs cytochrome P450-2E1. Or it can also occur in the peroxisome. So alcohol dehydrogenation can occur either in the microsome or either in the peroxisome. In microsome, it needs cytochrome P450-2E1 enzyme. Aldehyde is most toxic of the all. The same point I'll repeat in another point. So direct hepatotoxicity is by aldehyde or protein binding to aldehyde, that is called as protein aldehyde attack. So the three stages have three different mechanisms. The first step is steatosis. So fat has to get accumulated within the liver. Either fat has to come from somewhere into the liver or fat has to be produced within the liver and it should not go outside. So that is what is given in the next 2 points. Lipogenesis or fatty acid synthesis. A reduced fatty acid oxidation occurs in the liver. It has been thought to be due to the effects of PPAR alpha, peroxisome proliferator activator receptor alpha, or there is increased liposaccharide hepatic influx. It is said that alcoholism changes the gut microbiota. When the gut microbiota changes, more of triglycerides gets absorbed into the liver, causing more liposaccharide hepatic insults. So this is what happens in steatosis. So when fats get accumulated, naturally inflammation comes in. Any inflammation needs TNF alpha for its mechanism, or oxidative stress. Both these leads to inflammation. The stage is called as steatohepatitis. Any chronic inflammation leads to activation of stellate cells and fibrosis. So again, a table which is given in Sherlock's hepatobiliary diseases. Acetaldehyde itself can lead to steatosis. Acetaldehyde sensitizes the liver for the toxic effects of TNF alpha, hence it increases steatohepatitis. Acetaldehyde can mediate the effects by itself, or it can bound host proteins, forming protein aldehyde attacks, which can cause the effects. And acetaldehyde can cause endoplasmic reticular stress, that is oxidative stress, forming new antigens and causing all the effects. So this is what I was mentioning. Either free fatty acids have to be produced more within the liver, or it has to come into the liver, and liver nothing should go out of the liver. So the export of fat outside the liver occurs through VLDL pathway. It does not occur. This pathway is inhibited by alcohol. Whereas increased fatty acid synthesis, increased lipolysis, increased hepatic influx of triglyceride, everything occurs. So why this occurs is, we saw in this step, when ethanol gets metabolized, more of NADH is produced. NADH increases glycerol 3-phosphate, which increases hepatic free fatty acid production. So that was something about biochemistry. Now coming to the clinical aspects as such, why 80% of the individuals do not develop alcoholic liver disease, and why only a 20% develops the liver disease? Few mechanisms have been quoted for the same. One is the quantity of the alcohol matters. It is not the type of alcohol which matters, it is the quantity. In men, 40 to 80 grams per day of ethanol produces liver disease. The same 160 grams per day of alcohol for 10 to 20 years causes hepatitis or cirrhosis. Only 15% of alcoholics develop alcoholic liver disease. The same thing can be said in another way. 2 standard drinks per day in women and 3 standard drinks per day in men for 10 years can cause any alcoholic liver disease. 1 standard drink is around 10 to 15 grams. So when equated to 3 standard drinks, for men it comes around 50 grams of alcohol. For female it comes around 35 grams of alcohol. So gender, women exhibit increased susceptibility to alcoholic liver disease more than 20 grams per day. 2 drinks per day is probably safe. And hepatitis C infection occurring along with liver disease increases the severity of alcoholic liver disease. Genetics makes a person more prone for any disease, particularly alcoholic liver disease. PNPLA3 mutations have been associated with increased risk for alcoholic liver disease. And fatty liver is actually a non-specific finding. Not only alcohol causes fatty liver, practically any injury can cause hepatic steatosis. Any other fatty liver disease increases the risk of alcoholic liver disease. So the quantity of alcohol, female gender, hepatitis C, genetic predisposition, and fatty liver due to any other cause increases susceptibility for alcoholic liver disease. So the same picture I put in the discussion of introduction to hepatobiliary system. It is better to say any drink in terms of the grams. Beer contains 5% alcohol, malt liquor contains 7% alcohol, wine contains 12%, and whiskey, gin, rum, etc. contains 40% alcohol by volume. So convert that to grams, you'll get the total exposure the patient is taking per day. Same thing. So what are the clinical features? In hepatobiliary system, the most common presentation is asymptomatic. Or they can present with an unsuspected hepatomegaly. In a routine clinical examination, a hepatomegaly should point towards some abnormality. Jaundice and abdominal pain can occur, or the patient in later stages can present with portal hypertension, ascites, vesical bleeding, that is decompensated liver disease. So since majority of the cases are asymptomatic, you should always have a low threshold for early recognition in such individuals. So how to diagnose them? Any patient comes and tells you a history of alcohol, put an audit questionnaire or a fast audit C questionnaire or a cage questionnaire. So these questionnaires can give a clue whether the patient would have an alcoholic liver disease. Or a simple advice is any patient coming to you for any alcohol related problem, being it an alcohol dependent syndrome, be it an alcohol withdrawal syndrome, or any patient coming to you and giving you a history of alcohol, search for an alcoholic liver disease. Similarly, any hepatomegaly you come across, ask the history of alcohol so that you can diagnose alcoholic liver disease. Alcoholism causes B12 deficiency. B12 deficiency leads to macrocytosis. So when you look into any person's CBC, macrocytosis should prompt asking history of alcoholism, and raised liver enzymes ask the history of alcoholism. So this was the cage questionnaire. C for cutting down drinking, A for getting annoyed by drinking, D for feeling guilty about drinking, E for eye opener drinking. So any one question, if it is yes, and I have a high quantity of alcohol in it, that's called as alcohol abuse. About the lab features, as discussed in alcoholic liver disease, AST and ALT gets elevated, but it does not rise beyond 7-fold. So AST ALT is elevated, but the value is typically less than 400 international units per liter. AST ALT ratio, that is the de-risk ratio, is typically more than 1 because of two reasons. One, ALT gets reduced and AST gets increased. Why ALT gets reduced? This ALT needs vitamin B6 pyridoxine for its metabolism. So pyridoxal phosphate deficiency in alcoholism leads to reduced ALT. Why AST gets increased is AST has a variant called as mitochondrial variant. Alcohol increases the production of mitochondrial variant of AST. So AST increases, ALT reduces. So AST ALT ratio is usually more than 1. More than 2 is highly suggestive of alcoholic liver disease. Gamma glutamyl transferase. It is not specific for alcohol, but in a patient with history of alcohol, there will be elevated GGT. Bilirubin can be increased in alcoholic hepatitis. So these are the lab features. So when the patient goes for decompensation, there will be hypoalbuminemia, coagulopathy. So if you have to go for imaging, an ultrasound can diagnose fatty liver disease. Portal and Doppler can show reversal of flow, ascites, intra-abdominal venous collaterals. So a specific criteria has been mentioned for alcoholic hepatitis in Sherlock's. Less than 8 weeks of jaundice with history of alcohol intake less than 60 days, total bilirubin more than 3 milligrams per deciliter, AST more than 50 with AST-ALT ratio more than 1.5. If the 5 criteria present, suspect alcoholic hepatitis. That is to say, alcoholic hepatitis can be acute. It is not needed for chronic history of alcoholic fatty liver to change into an alcoholic hepatitis. Less than 60 days of alcohol intake with jaundice is necessary, is enough to diagnose an alcoholic hepatitis. So what about the prognosis of alcoholic liver disease? As mentioned, alcoholic steatosis is reversible. Alcoholic hepatitis is potentially reversible. Alcoholic cirrhosis carries a higher mortality. So alcoholic hepatitis has a short-term mortality, 30-day mortality of more than 50%. When it goes to alcoholic cirrhosis, there is a 60% mortality, combined mortality in 4 years duration. A few factors point towards a poor prognosis, like coagulopathy, anemia, hypoalbuminemia less than 2.5, serum bilirubin more than 8 milligrams per deciliter, renal failure, ascites. So these are the complications of cirrhosis, which will be discussed in the next class. All this points towards a poorer prognosis. For alcoholic hepatitis specifically, we have a score called as discriminant function. Actually, it is a modified discriminant function, MDF, also called as MADRI score, 4.6 into prolongation of PT above control. That is actual PT in seconds minus the control PT in seconds plus serum bilirubin. If the score is more than 32, it indicates a poorer prognosis. We have a MEL score, which comprises of total bilirubin, prothrombin time, and serum creatinine. If the score is more than or equal to 21, it indicates a poor prognosis. Diagnosis of cirrhosis itself is a poor prognostic factor. One interesting fact is, I told you microsomal ethanol oxidizing system is one mechanism of alcohol dehydrogenase activity. Paracetamol is also metabolized by the same CYP2E1 pathway. So ethanol, chronic ethanol intake induces this pathway. So when in a patient with chronic alcohol intake takes paracetamol, Paracetamol gets converted by this pathway into its toxic metabolites like NAPQA, N-acetyl-paraquinoamines. That leads to alcoholic liver disease. A patient with alcohol will frequently have abdominal pain, either due to gastritis or alcoholic hepatitis. They usually have some abdominal pain. So over the counter, if they take paracetamol, naturally more of NAPQA will be produced, and the paracetamol will be the cause of acute decomposition of the liver failure. So this is an important point to be noted. Always ask history of any paracetamol intake in the patient with alcohol. This we commonly miss in our history taking. So this is a compost of all the scores which we use: discriminant function, Mills score, a few other scores are there. So one histology score has been given in biopsy, AHSS histology score. One important point to note is cirrhosis carries 3 points. Hepatocellular PMN infiltration carries 2 points. Megamitochondria carries 2 points. So what about the treatment? The important cause is alcohol, and we discussed even up to the stage of steatohepatitis, the disease is potentially reversible. So complete abstinence from alcohol must be advised. If abstinence for 3 months did not result in improvement, they are unlikely to improve further. Malnutrition is one important factor which accompanies alcoholic liver disease, and malnutrition adds to the burden of alcoholic liver disease. So always address hypoglycemia, hypomagnesemia, hypophosphatemia, and B12 deficiency and thiamine deficiency. All these are certain specific reasons and mechanisms. Like patient with alcohol will not take any other intake, so they go for this malnutrition. Refeeding itself will precipitate hypophosphatemia. So these things have to be taken into account. So just abstinence from alcohol is enough in alcoholic steatosis. But if they go for alcoholic steatohepatitis, put a discriminant factor. If it is more than 32, it is an indication for starting steroids, either prednisone 40 mg per day or prednisolone 32 mg per day for 4 weeks. Pentoxifylline 400 mg TDS is also an alternative. Why? Because I told you TNF alpha is the main mediator for steatohepatitis. So prednisolone is an anti-inflammatory agent. So it has a use. Pentoxifylline is also a non-specific TNF alpha inhibitor, hence it's used. So how to find whether the patient is responding to our prednisolone or pentoxifylline? There's a score called as Lilly score. Again, it is a composite score comprising of patient's bilirubin at admission, patient's bilirubin at the end of 7 weeks of treatment, serum creatinine, and prothrombin time. If the score is more than 0.45, it indicates unresponsiveness to steroids. In that case, you have to change your therapy. That is, you have to go for liver transplantation. NAC, few of us think of it as a liver protective agent. It has been used, but it has some unproven data. So this flowchart is given in Harrison. Any patient with alcoholic hepatitis, give nutritional support and alcohol abstinence, and put a discriminant factor score or a Mills score. DF score more than or equal to 32 or a Mills score more than or equal to 21. An indication for starting prednisolone 32 mg or prednisone 40 mg, provided there is no absolute contraindication for steroid like GI bleeding, renal failure, or pancreatitis. This is taken from the 28th edition of Harrison, which came in 2019. The earlier edition of Schlesinger, which was published in 2018, gives 2 options: prednisone or prednisolone, and pentoxifylline. Both are equal options according to latest edition of Schlesinger. But I have mentioned the things only from Harrison. So this finishes alcoholic liver disease. So knowing alcoholic liver disease is very important because Indians and Asians are more prone to alcoholic liver disease, because I told you the second step in alcohol metabolism is aldehyde dehydrogenase. The variant of aldehyde dehydrogenase which is present in Asians is very slow to act. So more of aldehyde is prone to get accumulated in Asians. So coming to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, the same thing like alcoholic fatty liver disease. The same stages, everything is the same, but the reason is different. So fatty liver disease, which occurs when the level of alcohol consumption is less than the hazardous level, more than 1 drink per day in women and more than 2 drinks per day in men. Remember, this is not the one which I told you earlier. The level of alcohol consumption needed to cause alcoholic liver disease is more than 2 drinks per day in women and more than 3 drinks per day in men, but hazardous level of drink has been defined as more than 1 drink in women and more than 2 drinks in men. Without this history, if a patient presents with any fatty liver disease, it is called as NAFLD. It is strongly associated with overweight, obesity, or insulin resistant. Can also occur in lipodystrophy. It is the leading cause of liver disease in Western population and is in rising trend worldwide, particularly in India. Particularly in children also because of rising trends of childhood obesity. So the same steps, same 4 stages. Non-alcoholic steatosis, also called as non-alcoholic fatty liver, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis NASH, cirrhosis, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Just prefix alcoholic with non-alcoholic, the same stages. So I told you, steatosis is a highly non-specific finding. Practically any injury to the liver can cause steatosis. So what are the other causes? Alcoholic liver disease causes steatosis, which we discussed in detail. Hepatitis C, particularly genotype 3, can cause steatosis. Any inborn error of metabolism, A beta lipoproteinemia, where beta lipoproteins are needed for cholesterol transport from the liver to the peripheral blood. If this lipoprotein is absent, obviously, cholesterol gets accumulated in the liver and we'll get fatty liver disease, A beta lipoproteinemia. Cholesterol ester storage disease, galactosemia, glycogen storage disease, hereditary fructose intolerance, homocystinuria, and carnitine deficiency is something important because carnitine has been prescribed in and out in most of the private centers, and many people take it to be liver protective. What happens is carnitine is needed for cholesterol synthesis. So carnitine deficiency, we know carnitine is needed for transport of fats from the liver to the peripheral blood. So with carnitine deficiency, cholesterol will not be produced and the fats from the liver cannot be transported to the blood. So carnitine can replace that. So that's what systemic carnitine deficiency can be a cause of hepatic steatosis, which can reverse with carnitine replacement. Tyrosinemia, Weber-Christian syndrome, Wilson's disease, Ullmann's disease can cause steatosis. Any chemicals, CCl4, tetrachlorocarbon, petrochemicals, inflammatory bowel disease can cause. Any malabsorption can cause liver disease. Any malabsorption will lead to increased production of bile. When bile is produced more of fatty acids also will be produced. So inflammatory bowel disease, bacterial overgrowth, starvation, parenteral nutrition, bowel resection, gastric bypass, etc. Reye syndrome, AFLP is one entity in pregnancy, HELP syndrome. So AFLP and HELP syndrome are 2 pregnancy causes of hepatic steatosis. Many drugs can cause hepatic steatosis. Few drugs to be mentioned are bleomycin, methotrexate, doxycycline, which are cytotoxic drugs. And amiodarone can cause hepatic steatosis. So 3 common drugs. So why I mentioned this? If you are diagnosing a patient with a fatty liver, he is not an alcoholic. Try to rule out all these drugs, all these hereditary conditions, and hepatitis. So pathogenesis, alcohol directly causes steatosis, inflammation, and cirrhosis. That was the one which we discussed in alcoholic liver disease. The same thing, obesity and insulin resistance is the pathogenesis here. Obesity increases intestinal triglyceride absorption. So it increases hepatic triglyceride inflow. And adipokines in obesity, fat-derived microbial products increase insulin resistance. Whenever there is increased insulin resistance, we know insulin is a major anabolic hormone. So insulin resistance leads to more of insulin production. Insulin production leads to lipid deposition in the liver. That's what excess insulin production increases lipogenesis. Similarly, PNPL3 and TMP6SF2. These are some receptors which increase the risk of cirrhosis. So the same thing, in obesity, there will be increased intestinal triglyceride absorption. The leptin and adiponectin, which are adipokines, they also cause increased hepatic influx of triglyceride and reduced hepatic efflux. And any chronic hepatic steatosis will lead to inflammation by TNF-alpha. Chronic inflammation will lead to cirrhosis by hepatic stellate cell activation and leading to fibrosis. Same thing, simple steatosis is to steatosis plus inflammation. inflammation will lead to fibrosis, cirrhosis, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Again, the same clinical features. Most are asymptomatic. Some can present with vague abdominal pain. That can be hepatomegaly. But look for obesity. In alcoholic liver disease, a few clinical features can be clinching, like bilateral parotid swelling, duplicitous contracture specific for alcoholic. Similarly, if you are suspecting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, look for obesity. When we go for end-stage liver disease, we have portal hypertension, ascites, and worsening. Diagnosis, I told you, it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So there should be absence of hazardous level of alcohol consumption, which is there should not be more than 1 drink per day in women and more than 2 drinks per day in men. And other causes of hepatic steatosis like drugs, hepatitis C, and other conditions should be ruled out. And other causes of liver injury should be ruled out. Look for the following associations in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Look for metabolic syndrome, diabetes, hypertension, hypertriglyceridemia. Remember, I didn't mention hypercholesterolemia. It is hypertriglyceridemia specifically. Look for cardiovascular disease. Metabolic syndrome is associated with chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic pain syndrome. Mood alterations, obstructive sleep apnea, thyroid dysfunction, endothelial dysfunction, and increased carotid intermedial thickness. The last was specifically important because whenever you diagnose a patient with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, they are more prone for cardiovascular disease because of the endothelial dysfunction and carotid intermedial thickness. It is irrespective of the diabetes and hypertension. So severity assessment, again the same thing. Any severity in liver disease it is by clinical biochemical imaging methods and finally by liver biopsy. So L score, BART score, NAFLD score, APRI score, these are some scores which are present. Fibrosis, we have fibroscan, MR elastography, MR using proton density fat fraction. So these are something which I discussed in the introduction chapter, so I'm not going into the details. This is common for both alcoholic liver disease, non-alcoholic liver disease, and other diseases also. So on specific score in non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, so stage 1, there is pericentral vein, that is around the central vein or zone 3 fibrosis. Second stage, there is pericentral and periportal fibrosis, zone 3 and zone 1 fibrosis. Stage 3, fibrosis occurs in between, that is called as bridging fibrosis. Stage 4 is cirrhosis. This is important because in both alcoholic and non-alcoholic liver diseases, the process starts in around the pericentral vein, that is in zone 3. Whereas in toxic causes of liver injury, it is blood-borne, where the fibrosis starts in the periportal zone, that is zone 1 is to start. In alcoholic and non-alcoholic, initially zone 3 is involved, then zone 3 and zone 1 is involved, then zone 2 is involved, that is called as bridging fibrosis. Last stage we get cirrhosis. So treatment aims classified 3 things. One is specific therapy for NAFLD as such, treatment for NAFLD associated comorbidities, and treatment of complications. Currently, there are no FDA approved therapies for NAFLD. So the comorbids, obesity and insulin resistance is the most important factor. So diet and exercise to improve weight loss can have an effect. It has been shown that 3 to 5% of weight loss improves steatosis, 10% weight loss improves steatohepatitis. Low carbohydrate, low fats has been tried. There's no difference between saturated and unsaturated fat. So weight loss is the most important factor. Drugs for weight loss like orlistat, topiramate, phentermine have been tried for weight loss. The pharmacological therapy, I told you there is no FDA approved therapy as such. But based on our knowledge, since insulin resistance is an important factor associated, drugs which improve insulin resistance can be tried, like metformin. So metformin has been tried in a trial called the TONIC study. In this study, effects have been demonstrated in adults, but they are not consistent in children. Similarly, PPAR alpha inhibitors, pioglitazone and rosiglitazone have been studied in a PIVENT study. PIVENT study produced a good short-term efficacy. Pioglitazone produced a good short-term efficacy in non-diabetic NASH. Remember, non-diabetic NASH. But it produced significant cardiovascular side effects. Rosiglitazone did not produce efficacy and produced more of side effects, so it is not recommended. And antioxidants, vitamin E was studied specifically. 800 international units per day of vitamin E was studied. It is also considered as a first-line therapy in non-diabetic NASH. PIVENT's expansion actually stands for pioglitazone and vitamin E in non-diabetic steatohepatitis. Actually, they compared pioglitazone, vitamin E, and placebo. Vitamin E was better even compared to pioglitazone and placebo. Similarly, UDCA, which reduces bile malabsorption, reduces bile absorption, sorry. Betaine, they have been tried but not shown to be efficacious. Omega-3 fatty acid, it produces inconsistent effects. So all these drugs are being tried with inconsistent efforts. We can use, but there is no strong evidence. Some newer drugs in pipeline are probiotics. Why probiotics? Because intestinal gut dysbiosis is one important factor associated. So these have been tried. Fascinated X receptor antagonist, which changes necrosis. Intestinal bile acid transport inhibitors, FGF agonist. Anti-cytokine agents like TNF alpha inhibitors, etanercept, infliximab, etc. GLP agonist, DPP4 inhibitors. Remember, these are anti-diabetic drugs which have some other effects also. One effect is they can prevent NAFL. That is the reason why DPP4 inhibitors are gaining popularity. And dual PPAR alpha and delta agonists, because PPAR alpha is one mediator for hepatic steatosis, and other modulators of liver fibrosis have been. Since this is a disease associated with fat, why not try with statins? Again, the controversy continues because statins can be used for treating hypertriglyceridemia, which is a cofactor or which is a risk factor for NAFLD. But statins till now have not been proven as FDA approved drug for NAFLD as such. People are doing trials now. So as such, statins can be given if the patient is having hypertriglyceridemia. It can be tried in NAFLD as such, but there is no proof as of now. Since increased fat absorption is an entity, bariatric surgery can be done, but it's contraindicated in cirrhosis and portal hypertension. Liver transplantation is done in end-stage liver disease. So summarizing, diet and exercise can improve steatosis and steatohepatitis. Pharmacological therapy is still under trial. Metformin, pioglitazone, antioxidants, UDCA, betaine, statins are under trial. Bariatric surgery, liver transplantation. So NAFLD is again important because Indians are more prone for obesity, as we all know. So final conclusion is Indians are more prone for both alcoholic liver disease and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Both are in the rise. So have a watch for them. So these are my references. Quit alcohol, stop liver disease progression. Thank you. Need outside discussions.
Bombs, does alcohol cause B12 deficiency or folate deficiency?
Sleesingerல B12 தான் போட்டிருக்கு. Hello. Sleesinger gives B12.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.